Michael Lopez is a Fortune 500 transformation consultant and former managing director at EY and KPMG, two of the big four. His background runs from the intelligence community to the consulting boardroom, and he's the author of Change, 6 science-backed strategies to transform your brain, body, and behavior. He's also a Forbes Business Council member and a LinkedIn top voice. He recently ran a national workforce study called Rethinking Change Management, where he surveyed 1,000 employees and then he compared what companies actually provide during a time of change and what employees say they need and what employers provide. And in that study, there was zero overlap, meaning zero overlap between the top 5 items on each list. And this study was statistically valid with a 3.1% margin. In this conversation, we dive into why stress and resistance are a sign that change is working, and look at the zero overlap finding and what that tells us about how much leaders are running transformation and what employees actually need. And then we look at the AI readiness gap, where executives feel prepared while employees don't, and what that mismatch actually costs. Now, let's dive in. You write that stress and discomfort are not signs that change is failing. It's actually biological signs that change is working in an organization, which seems counterintuitive. Help me walk through that, like your perspective on that.
Well, it is true. And stress is an important part. And I think the important part to understand about leadership and about performance and about the human body is that resistance is required. And our bodies were designed under stress. Our bodies perform under stress. We learn under stress. We grow under stress. And I think we've oversensitized ourselves to some of what I'd call the pop culture stress references in terms of debilitating, traumatic, long-term stress. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about healthy, natural resistance that helps you focus, it helps you adapt, it helps you learn, it helps you grow. The challenge, of course, is in organizations, the relationship we have with stress, I think, is a little bit confusing because companies want performance. They want the output of change, but don't want the experience and process and inputs that are required. We set ROI targets, we set these big metrics in terms of either cost savings or output or revenue, operating margin, whatever your ROI indicator is. But I have to go through the resistance of change in order to get there. And it's always slower than companies want. And so what happens is companies, they give up. They're not all the way there yet. And they stop because what they say to themselves is, this must not be working. I don't see all the results yet. And that requires us to change our perspective about what results look like. That's the thesis of this argument about why stress is so important in people and in organizations. You have to keep doing it and you have to build a pattern of behavior, and that's going to take some time, and you've got to be patient, and that's hard for people.
Yeah, no, that thing's a key. When you look at change, you come in, are you looking at the behavior change, at the infrastructure of change, at the methodology of change, or pretty much sometimes just helping the executives know that change is happening? And still, like, a lot of executives that on it, they go through it and then it's like, well, it's not working, and then they get like restless about it. So like, tell me, where do you walk through in change? Like, where's your lens on it?
Comes through many angles. I think there's a few personas that I've seen in leaders that like to work with me or that work with me historically. I think the typical scenario is the company is trying to make some kind of a change independent of me, trying to change again, some kind of strategy, performance. They're going through what every company's going through now with AI. How come it's not getting us the results that we want? There's some experience in the business that there is a collective sense that we could either A, be doing better, or B, something's dragging us down. And what I often do is come in that conversation and try to understand what they're working on. What's their strategy? What's happening? Let's diagnose the situation. But you said something at the beginning about behavior that's so important is there's always a set of reasons that happen way in front of the experience they're having. That is the real reason why the organization is dragging behind expectations. And that's usually about people. We always, not always, I shouldn't say always, often fix the systems first. We design the org charts first. We design the technology. We release the product. All of those things, put in the policies. And that's all great because infrastructure and governance matter, and those things are important. But back to our first question that we were just talking about, the humans tend to lag that experience. And a lot of companies will come at this with maybe using a Field of Dreams reference. If you build it, they will come. That's not really how people work. Some people do, but most don't. And so, what I spend a lot of time doing is unwinding the very simple question to ask, but hard to answer, which is how did we get here?
Mm.
And what is contributing to our current reality? And then addressing what are the behavioral triggers for why we got here in the first place. Tell you a little story about a client I have. It's a nuclear power plant of all places. They're very unique and specific environments.
Hmm.
Every couple years, power plant shut down and they have to take the old fuel out of the reactor, store that safely, put new fuel in, and then they fix things while it's down, like kind of renovating your house.
Hmm.
And that experience is very costly. If you're not operating, you're not making money. So they want to minimize the amount of time that they're down and they want to maximize the things they get accomplished in that downtime
Mm.
so that they can run what they call breaker to breaker, right? I don't want any interruptions between now and the next time we have to do this. And so it's a very complicated process. It's a very stressful process. And every day I'm behind schedule is a day I lose money. And so come into a couple plants like this and they've said, well, hey, we want to perform better in our schedule. And so the question is, okay, well, why did you perform poorly the first time? And invariably I get, well, we didn't have this schedule right. We didn't plan correctly. We didn't execute on time. And then I'll ask a series of other questions. Well, why didn't you execute on time? Well, people didn't really know who made the decision on this particular thing. And we didn't really delegate well. And that's the kind of stuff that I work on. Why don't we make good decisions? Why don't we delegate?
Mm.
Why are we unable to be empowered to make decisions in the moment? What is it around how we coach and guide leaders to be more independent in their decision making? That's a harder problem to solve. That's not, did we turn wrenches fast enough? That
Yeah.
is, what is it about our culture as an organization that inhibits us from moving more quickly? And of course, we go work on that. And then it's also a more ambiguous problem in that you don't measure it on any one day and go, we're better. You have to sense the organization over time as you start to make decisions in a more effective way. So that's kind of the work I do. It's still the world of change management, but how I do it is very different than the very top-down driven change communications training, go read a newsletter, attend a 30-minute training about the new system and pretend that you're different.
Mm. Well, let's unpack that a little bit because you used to work for the Big Four delivering like traditional change playbooks. Is that usually how it's done, like top down, and then hopefully you
It
change or?
It's usually how it's done, and you see behind me on the screen, I know we'll talk about it, the
Yeah.
study that I've just released called Rethinking Change Management, and it really is about the fact that well, first, look, let me say that people who work in change management are good people working hard. They care about their clients, they care about their companies, they care about their people. This is not about intention. It's about a professional playbook that I think has been over recycled too many times, changed the names and we've dusted off a few frameworks and maybe changed the sequence here and there, but it's largely been pretty consistent for the last couple decades. And I've delivered those services. I've been the recipient of them, and they don't work effectively enough. They work in
Mhm.
some ways. It's good to drive awareness around communications. It's good to we all need some level of training to understand just the basics about what's happening. But back to the behavior issue, adapt as people through experimentation, through repetition, through failure, through feedback, through coaching, through re-guidance, and trying things over and over and over again. And again, it's slow, it's
Mhm.
asymmetric, it's nonlinear, and it doesn't fit with the more efficiency, linear-based objectives of an organization, which are get it done fast, get it done cheap, so that we can get to the other side of this change and start to perform. So that's why I did the study that you see behind me. And it's part of the reason that I launched this broad view because I've been pounding this table for the last 3 years. It's why I went out on my own was I wanted to have a different conversation with companies. I wanted to have the no kidding, the no BS conversation about what it really takes to change. I was finding that difficult in those other environments, not because there was anything wrong with them, but I just found that I needed the independence to be able to tell that story.
So this is kind of an oxymoron. Like 70% of change it fails. At least that's the stat. And then the people that you go to work with, like your clients, they said, "I want change now. I want it fast, and I want it as cheap as possible." But then
Yeah.
you're also saying, "Well, change takes time for culture, for it to flourish, for it to evolve." So it's like the attribution question. So like it's essentially like how do you sell change? How do you sell leadership? How do you frame it? Because those are three real constraints. 70% of them fail. buyers want it now, fast, like cheap and hard, and the actual work isn't that.
Yeah. One of the big themes from the study you've hit on, and it's what we call the minimization failure gap or cycle. And it's this cycle that in fact, I just did a post on this on Monday. We love to sell the easy button. We do it in all walks of life. We do it as parents with our kids. I do it all the time with them. This isn't going to hurt a bit. This isn't going to be whatever. You use your phrases to try to cajole your kids into little negotiations. We do it with AI. AI can post all social media that you need for 30 days in 2 hours, right? There's a tendency we have that our brains and our appetites like the quick, easy path. And when it comes to selling these services, we've developed a pattern with vendors and buyers that the easy button is what we try to instill confidence in our clients and in our consumers. We try to tell them this is not going to be hard. Don't worry about this change. Don't worry about this complexity. You've got a little bit of training. You've got a little bit of reading you need to do, and then everything's going to be fine. You won't notice anything. And of course, the problem is when we do that, we artificially
Setting them up for
shift our
failure.
expectation.
Yeah.
And when it then becomes hard, we magnify the level of hard that we experience. And this creates a serious trust gap and collapse that happens. And the data in our study is very clear that this pattern is real, that people and workers are experiencing language that says we're minimizing the difficulty in front of us, how hard it is to change, and that those same people are losing trust in their organizations because cynicism and skepticism are creeping in. And so the next time a change happens, it's like crying wolf. I don't believe you. I don't believe that this is going to be easy because every other time you've told me that, it's actually been a lot harder.
It's like
And
bad
so
parents. So yeah.
then gets reflected in the economics of how these consulting arrangements are built. It's one of the reasons, again, I started my own company because I was having borderline ethical dilemmas in terms of people saying, don't tell our clients this is hard. And I think just the truth of it is hard. So let's prepare for that version and come up with an economic model that makes sense rather than minimize the cost and then just upcharge you later. That's not the way I work.
How do you structure that conversation? And I'd love to talk a little bit about business model, then really dive into the breadth of the study because there's so much to unpack.
Yeah. It's a tough conversation. And it's one that I have found when I mentioned certain personas of leaders that work with me. If you are someone as a leader who wants to buy the traditional change approach, who does not want to invest a lot in these, and I don't mean a lot as in like millions of dollars. I just mean you don't want to make the investment in human adaptation equal to whatever other investment you're making in the project, technology, system, whatever it may be. If you're not somebody who naturally thinks that way, you're not going to magically change because you have a conversation with me. You might. I'll be honest with you about what it takes, but there's a couple things I've noticed. Number one, the clients that like to work with me are naturally progressive in their mindset. They're growth-oriented, growth mindset type people who are looking for new ways to do things. They're people who have tried everything else and it doesn't work. And so they've gone to the established methods and they realize they're not getting anything different from company A, B, or C. And so they're looking for new ideas. They're not just progressive in their own orientation, but they're actually seeking new ideas. And then I think the third thing is they're willing to be coached and pushed as a leader and as an organization. And I think they're willing to be uncomfortable. They're willing to experiment.
They're kind of
willing
wanting
to
that uncomfort. Like you're not sugarcoating it. You're being direct. So like the conversation is more, here's what it's actually going to take. And you're not afraid to confront them with that and they actually find that attractive. Like, okay, now this is
Right.
real. And
Yeah.
how do you look at the economic model? Because one of the things that I've been exploring with services now and services in the past is with AI, we are changing some of the ways what the economic model looks like. Some of it can be more incentive based or milestone based. So are you looking at milestones now? So like once we hit a certain milestone and change, then that unlocks, or is it mostly
Yeah.
it's the full package up front because it's going to take so much work?
Every client's different. I think it really is about understanding their circumstance. I will say there's a couple things that I try to do or not do. Don't ever walk into a client with an established 7 or 8 step process. There are phases that I think about in terms of the change journey, but phase 1 versus phase 2 for client A might be totally different because of where they're at as an organization. I could walk into In our first phase, we talk about it as the reflect phase. How did we get here? What's holding us back? Why are we in this situation? Some clients, you walk in and it's pretty clear why that's happening. They know the reasons, they just don't know what to do about it. For another client, it may be we're starting from zero and we really need to dive into history and culture and interviews and figure that out. So I think about it in phases, and it's about dialing up or down the level of effort in those phases for what the client situation looks like. So that's the first tenet that I operate with. The second is AI helps me every day. I design workshops, I design
Mhm.
deliverables, I build communications off of that. It's still my content, but so there's not a lot of charging for junior hours in my model. I have a collaborator that works with me and she's great, but you're hiring us for our expertise. And so when I think about is more value-based pricing in terms of, are you paying for data processing time? Are you paying for the collective wisdom of the people in the room where I can understand in the middle of a workshop, what is it that you need right now? I don't always know that until the workshop happens. And so you're hiring my historical perspective, experience, expertise to know, how do I get the most out of high leverage moments? I think about it that way. And then I think about the intellectual property of what you're accessing for me has a value, and I have a model that I price for that. So I try to be flexible. So it really just kind of depends on the scenario, and I try to be as fair and open. The last thing I'll say is cheap is not the right word. I don't have the overhead and economic drag down of a big four company. There is so much more that we can do as a boutique consultancy at a much more affordable price than if one of those clients was going to go to a big four vendor. 4x the cost at those other places because they got to pay for a bunch of stuff I don't have to pay for.
Yeah, that makes sense. So value-based plus licensing of IP. That's a good
Yep.
approach. Well, let's dive into the study. So, I mean, there's multiple PDFs that I saw from the study, and there's very long pages. There are some call
Yeah.
outs that I want to make, but I think I'd rather hear it from you. What was the most surprising finding from your study that you personally thought was surprising or insightful or new?
The biggest one is the flagship stat, what we call the zero overlap.
Hmm.
So I designed 10 questions. It ended up being more like 30 because each question had multiple angles. But the first question was, name the top 5 things that you get from your company when it comes to change support. What does that look like? And then tell me the top 5 things that you need in terms of what you feel is most effective for adapting your behavior. And we asked top 5, top 5. There was not a single overlap between those 2 lists.
Interesting.
What that means is employees are getting almost none of what they need when it comes to change. And what do companies provide? They do email, they do newsletters, they do training. Again, these things are not inherently ineffective on their own, but that's not what people need. What people needed, they needed time and space for experimentation. They needed to feel like they could fail and make mistakes and learn through that experience with coaching and guidance. They needed to see their leaders go first.
Hmm.
And that's one of the biggest things that I was also really surprised about. Not surprised because I didn't think it was happening, but the magnitude of the gap was really big. And so, what it tells me again is you go back to the 70% failure rate, which is we could have a whole conversation about where that data comes from. It's in the study.
Yeah.
It's been a heuristic that people have used for a long, long time, but let's just pretend that for a second that number's real. If we've been failing at a 70% rate for the last 20 years, and companies have been running the same playbook over and over and over again with top-down driven change, communications, and training that's not based on leadership modeling, but it's based on a passive experience that people consume information and then just try to magically be different. And yet we have real employees, 1,000 employees telling us exactly what they need: time, space, experimentation, coaching, guidance, failure, leadership modeling. Why aren't we doing that? It seems really simple, but it goes back to the next big finding, which we just talked about, which is the economic model and the disincentive for the kind of investment that's required. So I expected there to be a gap. I did not expect there to be zero overlap between those 2 lists.
How many people responded? So I think it's also valid to see the statistical
1,000.
significance. Yeah.
1,000 people, it is statistically valid within a 3.1% error margin. So this is a rigorous statistical analysis across multiple ages, multiple generations, ranks, industries, full-time employees across the US. So it is an authoritative view of what employees really need when it comes to change.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. If the leaders aren't doing it, then the stat that I want to call out was like 2/3 or 65% of senior executives are ready for AI. Like, yeah, let's do this. But in, I think it's 25 or like a third. Was it 29?
29, yeah.
29. So close to a third of employees feel ready. Why do you think that is?
A couple reasons I think now, having looked at the data more and talking to more people. We did the study back in November, December. Data came out in April, but we were kind of done in February. So it's still very, very fresh, but a lot has happened since January, what we've learned about the AI experience in particular. What's clear is that executives are getting the message driven top down from the C-suite about the AI race and making sure that they're investing. Everyone's trying to find the efficiencies, both in terms of labor costs, but also in terms of business performance. We're seeing all the data on AI pilots right now, much of it coming back saying they're not working. And why aren't they working? It's because the employees who were given a Claude license, they were given a
Figure
Copilot
it out.
license, they were given go log in and find something useful to do. Automate your job, make it go faster. It's
Wow.
very clear that employees are not being given direction. It's very clear that they don't understand what the capabilities are. Some people do, not everybody, but the vast majority. It's very clear that the strategy coming from the top is reactive, which is AI is not tied into the redesign of the business model. It's tied into let's get labor costs down by being as efficient as we can. So there's a host of issues. There's data issues, there's privacy issues, there's compliance issues. There's all of these reasons down at the working level,
Yeah.
and employees are being left to figure it out on their own, and many of them are just passively resisting. Some people come up with a novel idea, but the vast majority of people are struggling because they don't have the recipe that was called out in the study. Yeah, they have time to experiment, but it's experiment without
With
direction.
no
It's just
guardrails. Plus, it's very
with
complicated if you really want to use it correctly. So,
it's very complicated. And so it's just a great example of all of this coming to life right now. But executives get all the messaging. They get all the ROI stats from the vendors. They get all of the possibilities, the use cases. Look at
but they
what
don't
we
even know
did
how to
with
use it.
AI, but they don't know how to make that real for actual human beings.
Yeah, and I think this is the cool part about the pod is I get to talk to a lot of people like you. One of the guys was a Vistage chair. The other guy was like a CEO, a
Yeah.
CEO coach where he coaches like thousands of CEOs and the whole nine. This is the same story like through and through. That people at the top are ready, people who are actually executing are clueless, and we say AI doesn't ROI when in reality it's well like no one's teaching them how to use the actual hammer to
Yeah.
build something amazing.
Yeah.
And having done this on my own, like, yeah, you do have to spend a significant amount of effort, time, and investment to make it work properly. It's not just logging into the AIs online. So that's interesting. With this, how are you looking to redesign change? Like, what would be maybe like a cornerstone pillar? I know you mentioned the ingredients: time to fail, safe environment, leaders leading. But how are you personally changing or adopting findings from the study to help others change or with better your efficacy?
It's a great question. It starts with the first question you asked me earlier, which is how do you open the conversation? And my crusade, I won't even call it a purpose. I think it's more of a crusade at this point on LinkedIn, on social media, has been around shining a bright light on this conversation in ways that help people be willing to have the conversation. I think that's the first step. We've got to be willing to acknowledge this is really hard. It's been hard for forever. It will always be hard, but it's not impossible. And that has to come with a shift in the way executive teams both talk about change within their companies and then where and how they buy it, which means what the incentives are and the metrics are associated with our change horizon.
Mm.
So, as an example, I just have a client, we wrapped up a 2-year engagement with them, a full culture strategy rebuild that started with a very different question, but that's about the right amount of time. It's about an 18 to 24-month journey. If you're going to change meaningfully in your company, something significant. I'm not talking about we redesigned a HR or finance and we've got 20 less people. That's not what I'm describing. We're trying to change our culture, our strategy. We're trying to adopt a technology across our business model that fundamentally changes the way we work. That's an 18 to 24-month journey. And if you're not willing to do that, I've told people up front, then you shouldn't hire me because it's not the best use of your time. So first, have the conversation out loud. The second is redesign the incentives and the metrics and your expectations around the timing for it. I think the third piece that's tied to that, particularly for CEOs, is you've got to be able to push back on the board. And if you're a public company, have a conversation with shareholders about the journey that you're on in real terms that isn't about short-term results. If you're just trying to maximize the next quarter, is probably not the best story for you. And I think that's an important, open, honest conversation. The last thing I spent a lot of time on, and this is a place I think I need to do a better job. So there's part of that. Another big piece of this is all of that stuff that I said doesn't work, like communications and training. It's not that those things should not exist. They should. But I think we over index on the fact that I, as a person, could read a book and just magically be different, or I could go to a 30-minute training and just magically be different. That's not how it works. It needs to be complemented with real hands-on, coaching-led, experience-based work in the field. And we don't make a lot of time for that. A lot of times what happens in companies is we have go live dates. All right, everybody, we're going to flip the switch on whatever we're doing, and now we're live. And the truth is, for most people, the go live date is the beginning of their change journey, not the end. Because now I'm working in real scenarios with customers or with new products or technology or new collaborators across the functional boundaries, whatever it is. And I'm figuring that out as I go. And you've got to build that into the performance timeline of whatever it is you're doing. So there's a bit of this staging the process and understanding kind of what happens along that journey, which is tied to the roadmap as well. And so that's the biggest shift, is understanding that that takes time. It's going to take more money than you want, but it's going to be sustainable and effective over the long term.
Yeah, intrinsic versus extrinsic, it sounds like at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. Michael, where can people get the roadmap eventually, but the research and get a hold of you?
Yeah. The best place is to start with my website, michaeljlopez.coach. There's a page in there /research. You can download it. There's a free version, which is an executive version that's got, it's maybe 10 pages or so. It's got the major findings and the big rocks that people would be interested in. There is a paid version in there that is all 10 questions, deep dives on each one, multiple statistics around generations, which we didn't even talk about. But there's a huge slice of that that's around Gen X, my particular cohort, which I've been sorely disappointed in, but I'm helping us turn the corner. And so there's that paid version that and it goes far deeper into the recommendations. That would be the place to start. Post about this a lot. Once a week, I dive into a theme or a stat, and we talk about that in depth. So if you're willing to be patient, just follow along. And I've been rolling out each of these themes on a monthly basis over the last several months. So that's another great place to find the work that I'm doing on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on X. I don't do as much on X, but I post everything there. LinkedIn and Instagram are the two best places to follow me.
Right on. Well, Michael, we'll put those links in the show notes. Thank you for being on.
I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to get more of these podcasts, please go ahead and subscribe to wherever you're watching or listening to the pod. If you have any suggestions or questions that you want me to answer on the pod, or you have a guest that you want me to interview, please go ahead and email me all of your suggestions and questions at podcast@dogoodwork.io. That's podcast@dogoodwork.io. If you'd like to give me public feedback, you can go on Apple Podcasts, and from there, you can leave up to a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate that. If you like more free resources where you can get my best strategies to help you increase your company's performance and scale profitably, you can get handpicked articles to propel your growth, and you can get trainings and discussions that I give freely online, as well as low-cost resources such as my books and guides. You can get all of that by going to dogoodwork.io/resources. 90% of all of these resources are not behind any email opt-ins. You can get instant access by going to dogoodwork.io/resources. Now, if you'd like to accelerate your progress and shorten the gap between information and action and start seeing results in your business, let's work together to increase your company's performance and scale profitably and serve more clients without the overwhelm. You can request a free clarity call to see how we can best support you to reach your goals by going to dogoodwork.io/apply. Again, that's dogoodwork.io/apply. As always, it's an honor to be a small part in your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.